All right, today is Monday, July 7th, 2014. I am interviewing Mr. Michael Tesoro at the Sharon Historical Society in Sharon, Connecticut. The interviewer is Sam Rathbun, working with Central Connecticut State University. Also present is Carol Asher. Please state your full name, date of birth, and city and state in which you live.
Dr. Michael R. Tesoro, Tesoro, Sharon, Connecticut. Want my address?
Sharon, Connecticut. Great. And then, in which war did you serve?
Served during the Vietnam War.
What was your branch of service?
The United States Air Force.
And what was your highest rank?
Major.
And what general location did you serve?
During the war, served at Dover Air Force Base, Dover, Delaware.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I really should explain the process. All physicians during the Vietnam conflict, when they were in medical school, were all inducted into the military service. I was inducted initially in 1960 as a second lieutenant. They were put into a lottery system formulated by Representative Berry in 1959 for physicians and other professionals to finish their training, and then once they completed their training, they had to serve. So during the Vietnam conflict, on average, about 9,000 physicians were placed in a Berry plan from 1962 until the conflict ended in 1973. Male physicians, women were not required to follow that law. I was inducted in 1960, I think I said. And United States Air Force was my choice. And I am an obstetrician gynecologist, and I chose to be deferred during my training in obstetrics and gynecology. And at the end of that, exactly June 30th, by July 7th, I was placed at Dover Air Force Base. During that period of time, each 2 to 3 years, your rank was increased from a second lieutenant to a first lieutenant to a captain, and when I went in as a major.
And where were you living at the time? Where were you living when you enlisted? Or when you joined?
During this, I had quarters in the offices section of the base at Dover, Delaware.
And you said it was July 7th was the date?
It was approximately July 7th, which is ironic. Today is July 7th.
Why did you join?
At that point in time, it wasn't a choice. You either were drafted or you applied for the Berry plan. Any physician who did not get picked from the Berry plan had to serve immediately. So they didn't do any training, and they were sent over to Vietnam for the conflict. But those who chose to go into a specialty, once they completed that specialty, if it required them to go over to Vietnam, they were sent immediately, finishing their training. I was responsible for taking care of the dependents and the women in the military service.
Why did you pick the Air Force?
I really picked the Air Force, frankly, because I was married. I had a child, another child coming on the way, and wanted to stay close to home as possible. And the Air Force was a situation that most of my colleagues chose also. And, when you do what your friends do.
Now, thinking back, those first couple of days, what were your first days like when you first joined up, when you first started serving?
That, again, is a very interesting situation. Most people watch MASH, and MASH on television, there were a lot of funny things happened. Well, when I went into the Air Force, I had no clue on how to wear my rank of major maple leaves. When I first put them on my shirt, I had them completely upside down. And it took a staff sergeant to direct me to correctly get my uniform together. I had no particular outfit, other than my blue shirt, my major epaulets, and my name, rank, and my medical caduce on my shirt. Of course, I had those on the wrong side too, and the sergeant helped me put those together. So it was a funny episode. I finished my training on a Friday, and I had to be in Dover Air Force Base 4 days later. So I never had any training. Most physicians went to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas if they had time for the interval. But no sooner did I get to Dover Air Force Base that the physician who was there that I was replacing threw the keys to me to his house and drove off, and I was in.
Cool. And then, how did it feel once you kind of got settled? What were kind of those emotions, the first emotions? How did you feel as you kind of realized, what you signed up for?
Well, at that point in time, if you recall in history, it was sort of the beginning of the ending of the Vietnam conflict, 72, 73, and 74. We were all in the same boat, our unit. Our unit was a mixture of fellows who were surgeons, fellows who were general medical officers. I had one other obstetrician, and we were the first ones to train nurse practitioners in the military. As a matter of fact, the nurse practitioner that we trained to become a woman carer practitioner had a higher rank than me, but she was a wonderful individual and actually helped me along with the military part of my service. But it was almost comical because everyone knew that we were the last group to serve, and we got stuck. Honestly, that's the way it felt.
How'd you get through those first couple of days?
I get through the first couple of days. If I didn't have a staff sergeant to take me around, I probably would not have been able to get through. I never had a full ranking major's cap. I had the small V cap, which I have a copy of here, and I wore that throughout the duration. I had another sergeant who helped us with our housing, because we wound up with a 3-bedroom house, and coming from an apartment, it was really interesting that all of a sudden we have this large house. The fellow next to me was a captain who flew C-5A transport planes, and he was traveling back and forth from Vietnam, bringing back, I'm afraid to say, the ones who were killed. Dover Air Force Base is the base in the United States for where the major mortuary is for all those veterans or all those military who have been killed in both Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan.
So you saw firsthand.
Oh. When one of those C-5As came in, and they came in from the West Coast, we knew exactly where they were, what they had inside their pack. And when they landed, taps would be played, and while they were taking the caskets off the planes, if we weren't doing something active, we had to stay under attention until the last casket was off. That happened every day. For 365 days, for 2 years.
Now, when you first got to the Air Force Base, did you know anybody from? Did you have any friends from your medical training that were there with you?
Yes, ironically, my brother-in-law, who also was in the Berry Plan, same medical school as I was in New York, picked the Air Force. He picked it to become a surgeon, and he got the extension to do training in surgery. But 6 months into the training as a resident for surgery, he decided he didn't like surgery, and he went into radiology. He was deferred for another year, but then he had to go in and serve. Now, he didn't have the same rank I had. He had a rank of a captain because he didn't stay out for the full time. So he was at the same base at Dover Air Force Base. He was out of that base a year before I got in there. So introductions were essentially made when we visited him.
What were some of your first assignments when you first got there? What were some of the first things that you were
The first thing I did was to help reorganize the entire department for obstetrics and gynecology, because a lot of the non-commissioned office women came to that base. The dependents of most of the pilots were at that base, so we took care of them, and we had to. I had to be sure that they were being cared for properly, you know, as far as examinations were concerned, yearly checkups, and we had a system where we had certain days of the week. Rather, when I got there, it was all haphazard. There was no systematic period for that organized type of care.
Describe kind of a typical day for you in the service.
I'm sorry?
Describe a typical day for you on the Air Force Base. What did that include?
Well, a typical day, again, we didn't have beepers back then. We didn't have cell phones. And I had a yellow Volkswagen. And anybody who saw my yellow Volkswagen with the blinking lights knew they let me through the base without a problem, because that meant that someone was having a baby and I had to get there, or I had surgery, or I had an emergency. We would start off the day probably about 6:30 a.m., make rounds on the base hospital. By 7:30, 8 o'clock, the whole command, which meant every department of the command, met with the administrator, who was a colonel at the hospital, for our duties for that day. The one thing that was nice about the whole situation is once we were in the hospital, we could take off our uniforms and put on a scrub suit. So most of the surgeons and surgeon gynecologists, general medical officers, wore a scrub suit, which is the operating room type of memorabilia. Of course, the colonel never liked that because he wanted us all to be in our uniform. But we used the excuse that we had to run away quickly to get into the operating room, and we'd have time to change.
That's a good excuse. So when you were in the Air Force Base, did you work at all? You just worked only on the dependents. You didn't work on any active duty.
Well, yes, the active women who were in the Air Force.
Okay.
There were two bases that they came into. One was ours in Dover, and the other one was in Travis in California. The route that they came from was essentially Vietnam, Hawaii, Alaska to us, or Alaska to Travis in California. But most of the mortuary people came to Dover, because that was the central area. And from Afghanistan, they're coming across from Europe to, again, Dover. It's the largest mortuary in the United States, which is sad.
Were you awarded any medals or citations during your service?
There was a medal given to most of the physicians who were serving during a foreign war, but no hero medals or anything like that, because essentially the only hero medals activity that we had was dealing with the colonel, who was a professional Air Force person who really didn't like the physicians who were there only for 2 years.
Yeah. Why was that?
Well, because we were sort of like, I only refer to MASH program, and the way those fellows during MASH acted, we essentially were the same. We had a psychiatrist in our unit, and a psychiatrist would never wear his cover. The cover is the cap on the head, and not one officer ever questioned him not wearing his cap. The main reason is that he could write a little note and say that they're not able to fly, and if they couldn't fly, they didn't get their extra pay. So he had his own little secure area.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, when you were kind of, did you spend most of your time with other medical officers and other people that were in your program, or was it kind of, you were just kind of put amongst everybody and it was?
No, when we were one body of fellowship with the medical corps. We used to try to make ourselves relax. No antics like they do on MASH, but there used to be a game called Risk, which is a war game. And we would take 2 boards of Risk, and we would have at least 8 of our medical corps start the game at 9 o'clock at night and probably play through 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, again against the rules, because we had to go to sleep at a certain hour. And this game of Risk was an unbelievable way of getting rid of anxiety and pressure and tension.
Now, even though you weren't right there on the front lines, and you weren't one of those people that was staring, the conflicts and the war and the price of that war directly in the face, so to speak, how did you kind of deal with some of the things you saw, on a daily basis? Some of the horrors that you saw, as well as seeing those planes coming back with caskets that you knew held dead bodies.
It was a very wonderful learning experience about life, because I would talk to some of the crew on some of those planes. When they flew over to Vietnam, they knew probably what's coming back. And then when they came back on the plane with caskets, and the C-5A can hold up to 30 to 40 caskets, all flag draped, they would be sitting next to this crew. Not one word went out from anybody. And when those planes landed, it was very, very trying. To this day, my son, which Michael he was about 10 when we were stationed there, and when he hears a C-5A fly over, he recollects back to that time. He actually, because he knew what those planes were bringing in, and it was a experience that everyone on the base had. It was not fun.
What was kind of the general tone on the base? What were kind of people's attitudes towards the war at that point? Were people kind of sick of it? Or
Well, I don't know if I would call it sick of it. I would say that very similar to what we're finding now, if you go through the history of the United States and the number of wars that we have been in. The initial phase of that war is, yes, let's go in there and be successful. The second phase is, okay, we've done enough. Let these people fight for themselves. We see this now in Iraq. We see it now in Afghanistan. It's a losing battle. We should really pull back, let those individuals take care of themselves if they can. I'm not saying build a wall around us, but it was difficult. Many of the physicians who graduated after 75 or 74 never served in the military. So they really don't have that experience. The ones for Iraq and Afghanistan are serving, and I'm sure they have that same experience. Enough is enough.
Did you sustain any injuries while you were on the Air Force Base?
I did not.
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were serving?
Well, that's quite easy because they were all living on the same base, and the housing that we had was at the Air Force Base offices section. There's a non-commissioned officers section and commissioned officers section. The one thing that the commissioned officers, the full Air Force officers, didn't care about, the medical care, was that we also wound up fraternizing with the non-commissioned officers more than with the commissioned officers. In other words, we felt that they were part of the same group that we were. They weren't. We weren't fully. What's another say? We weren't there for an extended period of time to try and get extra rank. I once was assigned to relieve an obstetrician on the island of Tercia, which is in the Azores. And it was just, at that point, it was the second year of the war, second year that I served during the war. And I said to the colonel, I said, I don't want to go. He said, well, you have to go, or you have to choose who has to go. So with my colleague, we used the straw effect, and I picked the short straw. So I wound up going. The funny thing about that was we left from McGuire Air Force Base. I had to get a transport plane from McGuire Air Force Base to the Azores. Dover is about an hour and a half south of that. I wanted my wife to come with me. So to do that, I had to sneak her into the officers' quarters and then try to get a flight on a C-141 transport with her. The problem was that they were all filled, so I was 2 days without any orders or anything. I literally was AOL, away without leave, because they were looking for me in Dover and they were looking for me in the Azores, and I was stuck at McGuire Air Force Base waiting for a plane so I could get my wife on. We finally got on the plane and we wound up nonstop from Dover, from McGuire in New Jersey to the Azores. As the plane landed, I got off, and the fellow I was relieving threw me his car keys and said, "I'm getting on this plane, I'm going to Spain. The place is yours." So here we were in the middle of the island. I had no clue what my job was except to cover this fellow who now left. And I was there for 3.5 weeks. I can't complain because Azores is a beautiful little island, but I was restricted. I was the only officer, gynecologist on the island to take care of all the women officers and non-commissioned officers who were stationed there.
What were the people that were stationed there? Was it just, what was the purpose?
The reason they were stationed there is because it was as it was during World War II, the Azores base on the island of Tercia is a base where the planes could not make the trip directly across the Atlantic, so they stopped there to refuel or to pick up other individuals to take them to either Spain, where there was another base, or to Germany, where the second base was, or to, at that time, Addis Ababa, which was in Ethiopia, was the third base.
What was the food like on the base?
What was the what?
What was the food like on the base?
Well, the food, of course, the breakfast at the hospital was not your best low-fat, not low-calorie type of diet. They used to have a creamed beef that they would put on toast, and I'm not going to tell you what we used to call it, but that was the staple for breakfast in the morning, with eggs if you wanted it, with bacon if you wanted it, with sausage if you wanted it. Most of the other meals for lunch were fairly okay, and then in the evening I would either eat at home or my wife and family would go to the Officers Club, which was a wonderful place for dinner.
Did you have enough supplies while you were there?
So my supplies literally were gynecological supplies, and I did at times have to go to the colonel, actually, matter of fact, the general of the base at that point, not the administrator of the hospital, to ask for more equipment and some other assistance, because we were literally taking care of two people, taking care of probably, on average, 3,500 people. Quite a large number.
Did you feel any pressures or any stresses while you were working on the base?
We had several difficult hours as far as surgical procedures were concerned. I can remember one when the general surgeon had called me at 3 o'clock in the morning because he had a gunshot wound that had just landed. They had stopped the bleeding, but the bleeding started again, and he needed assistance getting into the pelvic area, which I would be familiar with, and he wasn't too familiar with it since he was a chest surgeon. So that was very stressful, driving to the hospital 2 o'clock in the morning, and this one guy was literally bleeding to death. He already had 5 units of blood. But he survived. When he found out a gynecologist stopped his bleeding, he wasn't too happy about that.
Hey, but at least he's alive, right? What were some of the things you did for kind of good luck? Were you superstitious at all? Did you have any rituals or anything that you did to try and bring yourself good luck?
Not that I can recall. The only thing really is that the unit, the hospital unit, literally stuck together very closely. And when one of our officers became a flight surgeon, which meant you had to go on a plane, there was a concern because where they were going. I was actually assigned to a C-5A as the Vietnam War at the end of that period in '74 was coming to a close. It went from Dover to Alaska, to the Philippines, to Vietnam, to evacuate people. And the plane just before that was shot down. The plane I would have been on left the runway with the back door open, taking off that way. I was not on that because I got reassigned at that point to another activity on the base at Dover. So luckily, yes, because I only had like 4 or 5 months left to serve. Had I gone on that, I might have been one of those people.
How did you guys entertain yourselves in your off time?
As I said earlier, we meaning the officers, the medical officers, used to play that game Risk. I mean, it was harrowing because most of our wives didn't like the idea that we were doing that. We'd get together at night and then we split off and go into a kitchen or whatever and lay the board and play this game until 3 o'clock in the morning. Of course, you wind up playing. Nobody is going to team up with the other person, but of course, as the game gets along, 2 or 3 other officers would say, "Okay, you're on my side now. We're going to get this guy," and then we'd get some other guys and go. And that was one of our idiotic ways of relieving some tension.
Did you guys get time off? Were you allowed?
Normally, you're supposed to get, I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks leave. My leave, I used it as an educational leave, and went to a base in Seattle for that. But that meant that somebody else had to come and cover you. And that was very few and far in between. There were not too many people after us, so there was nobody to relieve you. So when I really got out of the Air Force, which was in '74, I had probably six weeks of leave left, which I took at that point in time. It didn't get me out any earlier, but I collected my pay for that period of time.
Do you recall any particular humorous or kind of unusual events that took place while you were on the Air Force Base?
While I was on the base, most of the officers who went to on the C-5As on their way to Vietnam had to stop at either Alaska, Kyoto, Japan, or Manila in the Philippines. And the one thing that they did for many of the other officers who couldn't do that trip, they would buy equipment or items for them that were made in those countries. We had a candelabra which was stood about this high, which was made from the shells of the ammunition that was used to fire at the enemy. So you had a candelabra, which was a candelabra that you would find in a church, for instance, brought back. Well, the problem was that the captain that brought it back emptied his plane and stored it in a warehouse. So he and I decided, well, why don't we go in the warehouse and get it? We went into the warehouse to get it, but of course, not letting anyone else know, all alarms went off. And all of a sudden, these guys with these M16s come in and say, okay, hands up. And I said, wait a second, I'm a physician, and this is the captain of the plane. But we should have essentially, well, we didn't never think of doing that kind of a thing. And that's where most of us got into trouble.
Sure. When
Remember, we were very young during that period of time.
Sure. How old were you when you were serving?
I was probably 20, let's see, 74, 29, 28, 26, somewhere in that range.
What did you think of your fellow officers and the other people that were serving with you?
They were all a bunch of wonderful men and women, because we also had women in our group.
Yeah.
No, we didn't have women officers. The nursing people were the women officers. We didn't have medical corps because they didn't have to serve.
Did you keep in touch with anyone after you were done serving?
To this day, I have probably 3 of them. Most of them wound up in either Philadelphia or New Jersey or Delaware, because the Dover Air Force Base is very close to those areas. And I wound up here, so it was, yeah, it was hard to keep in touch all the time.
Did you keep a journal while you were there?
The main journal I kept was in my head, but I never wrote anything really down.
Tell me about the day that you were discharged. What were kind of some of your feelings?
The day I was discharged? Well, my wife and I had moved to Sharon, Connecticut, to start my practice here. However, I wasn't out of the Air Force until July 9th, literally, of 74. My youngest son, Todd, was born on July 5th in Charlotte, Hungerford. So I had to drive back and forth from Dover, which was a 4-hour trip, to be here for his delivery. And finally, once he was born, then I was out of the Air Force for that period of time. And luckily, I was collecting my vacation pay that I never took.
What was it like coming home after being on the base for 2 years?
It was a little peculiar because I was always ready to jump first. And again, we didn't have cell phones; just came in as I was getting out. And the way we would communicate, beepers. I did have a beeper. And the way we would communicate if I was off base, the nurses would beep me. The beepers had colored lights on them. A yellow beeper meant I had time to get back. Green beeper meant just call us. Red beeper meant get your tail in here ASAP. So that's the way we communicated when we were on base. And Delaware is a very interesting little area, town, Dover especially. Actually, Dover is where most of your corporations are registered that are not part of Delaware. But the town itself is very nice and the people are very nice. The one thing I did do, as a matter of fact, I just thought of it, the raceway that's down there, Dover
International Speedway, something like that.
what is it called?
Dover International Speedway.
Yeah, that's exactly International Speedway. They needed doctors to stay at the local area where the cars are taken off from, and they would hire us, the physicians from Dover Air Force Base, on our weekend off. So could you imagine spending a weekend off on the raceway where you got these cars going around after being at the hospital for 6 days?
Yeah.
But it was an activity that kept us close by in case we were needed.
Sure.
And most of the physicians did it.
Now, when you finally moved back to Sharon and you're done with your service, how long did it kind of take you to kind of reacclimate to the normal life, so to speak?
Well, I was starting my practice immediately and solely, so I had to really turn gears quickly. I was in the reserve until 1986, so I did serve in the reserve. I wasn't completely discharged, and luckily there was no callback immediately. And then I've got my formal discharge papers with me to show you. But it's coming to a strange town with very few people that you know. and starting a medical practice, it was strange and it was hard. I must admit that one of the people at the town who became a friend of mine almost immediately was Mrs. Eloise Buckley, the matriarch of the Buckleys. And she got in front of the church at St. Bernard's on each Sunday service and mentioned that I was in town and that we should support Michael Tesoro and his new practice. Well, people who knew her, they flew off like a kite. Wonderful person.
When you came back and you're kind of getting acclimated to your practice, did you miss Dover at all?
I did. I missed my colleagues, and we would be communicating quite frequently on the phone about our antics, and boy, we miss doing this. How can we get together? Can we meet some way midway between? And again, everyone was starting a practice again after doing their training, 2 years of service, and then knowing that no one else is going to do that service, and you're left for to fend for yourself. They wanted to keep all of us in at that point in time. Had I stayed in, I was supposedly going to be transferred to the northeast coast of Italy, where a new base was being formed, and I would go in as a lieutenant colonel. But again, we just didn't want to do that. My wife's father had just died, and her mother was not too happy. So we figured we'd bite the bullet and come back to civilization. You notice I said civilization.
When you were in medical school getting your training, you said you were accepted in the program in 1960 and enrolled officially at the Air Force Base in 72. Was any of your med school training paid for by the GI Bill?
No, nothing was paid by the military or GI Bill. It was as I said earlier, Representative Berry in '59 got this law passed for this extended relief of anyone in medical training. And it was a lotto system. If you didn't get picked, you had to serve. I had a number of my medical school colleagues who had to serve immediately, right over in Vietnam, put in front of a open wound, and they were just out of internship. Unbelievable experience. Some of them came back, some of them didn't come back.
So you said you started your practice in Sharon. You started doing that. How did your military experience kind of influence, your practice and your life kind of afterwards? Once you kind of, like you said, got back to civilization. How did your service kind of?
I think I was organized because I had been organized for 2 years, sort of like a well-trained individual that certain times of the day you do certain things. So it kept me in that vein. I wasn't just haphazardly, oh well, I'll go to the office today. It made me more exacting. It made me more exacting in my surgery. It made me more exacting in the care of patients. So I think that experience was good. I wouldn't say that it was a horrible experience. My own opinion, I think all physicians should experience that 2 years once they get out of their training. Because they come out of their training and they don't know how to communicate. You really had to learn how to communicate with people when you were in the military. You really had to learn how to explain what the problems were with their medical issue. Today, I'm afraid to criticize, but most of the younger physicians will order a lab test, have a chart in their hand, and the other hand's on a doorknob rather than sitting down and talking to people. So it did train me to do that.
So kind of helped your bedside manner, so to speak?
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you join any veterans organizations after your...
I was part of the American Legion, but I became so involved with my practice that I didn't have time for that. The American Legion here in town I am active as far as working with them. I did give a talk at Memorial Day, I think it was 2 years ago or so, for them, and I'm active with them when they march on Memorial Day. I do feel that that's a very important day of the year. It's not really a holiday for picnics, it's a holiday to reminisce and think about all of those young men and women who are losing their lives every day or are wounded. That part is also losing part of their life. They should also be recognized and they should also be remembered. We've got a tremendous number of traumatic brain syndrome that many people don't feel is really a syndrome, and they're just freeloaders. That's not true. Many of those young people have really suffered. Just get yourself into an accident and see how you feel when you get into your car the next couple of days. You're a little shaky. Well, these fellas and women are there for 2 years. They're more than shaky, and they need all the help we can give them.
Yeah, PTSD is definitely something that's on the forefront right now, especially with Iraq and Afghanistan.
And not only that, but look at medicine. Actually, when I was there, we weren't able to save many people coming back from Vietnam. So they died. You've got those 50,000 that are on the wall in Washington. Today, they're able to save them, and they're able to put artificial limbs, artificial arms, legs, eyes, parts of the head together, keeping them alive. Well, they might be alive, but they're missing part of their body. Those people also need our care, not for a year, not for 2 years, but for the rest of their lives. And all of the individuals who say, oh, they're just freeloaders, they have to really understand what's going on and have experience what we've experienced. It's not fun.
Now, how do you think military medicine has kind of changed from when you were serving in 1970 to if you were to go to the exact same Air Force base doing the exact same thing now in 2004?
It's changed significantly, mainly because of the new equipment and technology that has come about. Most of the military physicians that are physicians now were not drafted. Most of them are military personnel. In other words, they've gone to, you asked me about did they pay for my medical school or my training. If it did do that, then I would have to serve extra time. I would have to serve an extra 2 years for every year they gave me. Well, most of the military today are part of that catch-all. Not all of them. A lot of them are also volunteers. Their technology is unbelievable. The lives that they're able to save today compared to Vietnam in 72, 67, 68, 69 is phenomenal. But again, they're saving their lives, but they're coming back with no limbs, traumatic syndrome, and they need our care for a long period of time.
How did you deal with that as a medical professional, serving in the Air Force Base? How did you kind of deal with that dilemma? Whether or not you faced it yourself actually, how would you deal with that dilemma of knowing that there's nothing you can do to help this individual, and really it's out of your hands, but yet, as a human being, you want to be able to save this person?
Very difficult. Very difficult to answer that question. It's within you that gives you the feeling that I wish I could do more, and you can't. At our time, it's because you didn't have all the materials. Like the fellow I told you about that was bleeding. I used an old method that I was trained in 1968 of how to stop bleeding with a clip. And that's how we got this fellow's bleeding stopped. I mean, I can see that fellow as I talk to you now on the table in the operating room. So you never really lose that image. You hide it in the back of your brain, but it always comes forward. And it's sad. It's very sad.
Do you find yourself kind of having flashbacks,
Well, I do get that oceanic feeling when the Star Spangled Banner is sung at a ball game. I know tonight I'm going to see the Red Sox beat the White Sox. And I know when they play the Star Spangled Banner, I get that rush feeling all the time. And I do get the feeling sometimes of sadness. I can't avoid it. I don't try to avoid it, but it's there.
Now, if somebody were to say, Dr. Tesoro, please put your entire 2 years of service, into one sentence. I'm sure it's difficult for you, but how would you kind of describe it overall? The entire 2 years you were there.
Well, I felt that it was a service to our country. I do feel that it was a necessary service, and that by serving, I also learned and gained wonderful experience about camaraderie, about helping other people who couldn't help themselves, and I felt good about it.
One last question. How did you deal with the families that came to the Air Force Base to greet the caskets of their loved ones that were coming back?
Again, a very difficult position. If they were my patients, I was involved immediately. I would attend with them to the area of the mortuary where the caskets were lined out. And we're talking about a huge building with minimum of 100 caskets, flake draped caskets. The families would come to me because they were the wife was my patient or the mother was my patient. And we're talking about her son or her husband who is now in that casket. I would have to deal with it very, very carefully as far as letting them know that all is not lost, that they've contributed to a wonderful situation, but it's sad that their loved one is no longer with us. But they're with us in a sense of their spirit. I probably did that about 20 times in the 2 years. Again, because they were my patients on the base, and this was some of the dependents of people who were also living off the base, but were military dependents who came to the base for care. They knew me enough to tell me that they were sad, where they wouldn't talk to anyone else. Or my colleague, he did the same thing with the patients that he had. He would go with them to the area where the caskets were, because then they had to be put on a hearse. There's a wonderful movie that actually one of our residents, who I'm blanking on his name, Taking Chance is the name of the movie. And it's a movie dealing with just that. It's a casket coming back to Dover, the body being prepared in Dover, and then the Major Marine taking that casket all the way back to Wyoming, escorting it on all planes from that point in Dover to another Air Force, to another base, and then onto a civilian plane to the home in Wyoming, and then to the burial.
Do you think your service made you a better doctor later on in your life overall?
I believe it increased. It was 2 years more that I had after 4 years of, actually 5 years of training, where I was put on my own. And yes, it obviously made you care more for people, made you understand people's emotions and families' emotions, and work with the families and talk to the families. I find that today what's missing is physicians will talk to the patient, and then the patient is asked by the family, what did the physician say? And the patient would say, well, I can't really remember. When I always had patients, I always used to include the family in the discussion, if the patient wanted it. And it was so helpful to the patient, to the family, and to me. That's missing today. The image I have today of young physicians, I'm sorry to say, hand on a doorknob, chart in the hand, which is a computer.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover in the interview that you want to?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you for your service and also for taking the time to be interviewed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the interview.